Hi and welcome to my presentation for my Science and Teaching GCSE A-Level and BTEC Sport assignment. For this assignment I have chosen to do the Edexcel GCSE PE syllabus, which can be seen on screen now. Within the macro cycle that I've created for the year's work, I've included half of the topics that will be covered by the end of the GCSE course. This breakdown of the course is what Gamble et al. 2006 called periodization. This is a framework that provides a structure of how to achieve a goal. For this, the periodization aims to teach the students all the content they need to know to ace the exam at the end of the 2 years of the GCSE PE course. The first topic I've included is Applied Anatomy and Physiology, Topic 2, Movement Analysis, Topic 1, Health, Fitness and Wellbeing, and lastly Topic 4, the Use of Data. Throughout the whole macro cycle, students get 2 one-hour lessons per week for the course. 1 hour is always practical so that students can experience and be graded on different sports that they can use for their practical grade side of the GCSE. Then they get 1 hour of theory. In this, all the content for the exam is taught, however over the year there are a few lessons that are practical to be able to teach the theory. I picked to start the year and the whole of the GCSE PE course with Topic 1, Applied Anatomy and Physiology. This topic covers the bones and muscles that make up the body, which creates the baseline for the whole of the GCSE PE course. With a strong knowledge of bones and muscles, it will help students to understand how the body works and moves, especially in a practical setting. This knowledge is key for students to understand, especially when looking at the longer mark questions, as the theory has to be applied to a practical setting. Then, moving on, I have chosen to do Topic 2, Movement Analysis. This topic includes planes and axes and the lever system. Personally, when I was at school, this is something that I found difficult to understand, and so did the rest of my class. So I thought this would be a good topic to put next, as there'd be a lot of time for students to get their heads around the topic and keep practicing it throughout the year. This was also a good topic to follow on after learning the muscles, as the lever systems involve being able to name the fulcrum, resistance and effort. This topic is also something that links into the longer mark questions, as with an understanding of this, it will allow students to gain some easy marks throughout the exam. Then I chose to go to Topic 1 from Paper 2, which is Health, Fitness and Wellbeing. This includes diet, hydration and why it is important to lead a basic healthy lifestyle. These topics are important to understand before looking at anaerobic and aerobic exercise and the effects of long and short-term exercise on the body. These are also important topics to understand for the students personally, so they understand how they can live a long, healthy, physically active lifestyle. Then I chose to return to Topic 1, Applied Anatomy and Physiology, to teach the cardiovascular and respiratory system, aerobic and anaerobic exercise and the long and short-term effects of exercise. For these topics, students need to understand how the body moves and which muscles work together for the body to be able to respire and for the cardiovascular system to work. This means that students are constantly refreshing their memory on the muscles and joints throughout the year. Throughout the whole year, I've added in topic tests as the last lesson for every holiday before the students go on holiday. This means that throughout the year, areas of weakness can be highlighted so that they can be gone over before the end of the year exam and before the GCSE PE test at the end of Year 11. As well as this, it also allows me to identify individuals in the class that are more confident with the theory side of PE so that they can help each other in class. For example, a change of seating plan so that some students that are struggling can get help from stronger students, or by placing all of the stronger students on one table so that they can stretch and motivate each other. This is important as Turner 2011 states that periodization has to be based around the students and what they are trying to get out of the cycle. This means that barriers have to be taken into consideration so they do not hinder the final results. Therefore, we do not want to place stronger students with weaker students, as sometimes they can distract each other. Throughout all theory lessons, I have tried to make them as practical as possible so that the lessons are as engaging as possible. As well as this, it makes sure that the lessons are different so that we're not just sat in front of the whiteboard the whole time. For example, I've made some of the lessons so that they are in an ICT suite so they are more student-led. I have also tried to incorporate some practical lessons so that can be used to see certain topics in action. For example, in the second half term, there is a lesson on planes and axis, which is in a practical setting so that students can see them and identify them in person, which will help them have the knowledge to be able to do that in the test. Alongside this, I have tried to include lessons which are standalone so that students can think back to that lesson and remember the information for the test. For example, I have included a practical lesson in the third half term, which is a relay race to link different keywords together and then to understand the effects of sedentary life. In this lesson, I have made it so that the groups run to pick up information that they need, then write it down instead of sitting down in a classroom the whole time and being less engaged. This links to Dashman 2013, who states that when children become bored, they cannot reach their cognitive and metacognitive potential. So with varied lessons, children will receive more positive experiences. Another example is when learning the cardiovascular system, it is important that students know the path of the blood around the heart and around the body. So to be able to learn this, I've made a practical session where the children become the blood and the oxygen and the carbon dioxide so they can mimic the route around the body to be able to remember it. For the rest of this presentation, I shall now speak through my microcycles that I've planned, which follow the constraints-led approach. This is what Brymer and Renshaw 2010 described the constraints-led approach as being a student-centred approach to teaching which changes the environment, task or people to bring about more learning in certain environments. This first lesson is an active classroom lesson which gets all the students up and moving around the classroom. This lesson ensures that all students can identify and name the majority of the bones in the body. It starts with the YouTube song called Them Bones, which I've added to try and engage the class as it is light-hearted and fits the topic of the lesson. After this, the students will then have just under 10 minutes to fill in a worksheet which can be seen on the next slide, which recaps the previous lesson. Then I will split the class up into mixability groups so that all the groups are fair. In these groups, they nominate one person to be the skeleton. This person, by the end of the session, will be covered in post-it notes to give a real-life representation of the skeleton. Then, setting a timer, the students in that group have 10 minutes to name all the bones they possibly can by sticking them onto this person. Then, after this 10 minutes is up, I will split that group in half and they'll move on to work with a different group of people. They will then, in that group, have 10 more minutes to be able to identify any bones and any joints that group before haven't named. Then the groups will change again after that 10 minutes, and this time the groups can have a textbook to identify any bones and joints that they don't know. This should mean that every bone and every joint should be identified and post-it noted on this person. Then everyone in the class will receive a paper copy of a skeleton that will need to fill in all the names of the bones, and once this is done, they can take off all the labels off of the skeleton. Lastly, groups will be changed into completely mixed ability one more time, and then it will be a race to stick back all the post-it notes back onto the certain person to see who can do it the fastest for a prize. This is the starter worksheet that I created for the start of the lesson. In this lesson, what constraints have been used? In the environment. With the environment constantly changing throughout the lesson, Roberts et al. Says that children have to learn to adapt and use problem-solving skills as well as learning all the content, which means that they are more engaged in the lesson. In this lesson, all the people are constantly changing who they are working with. This means that all the class get to share their knowledge on what they know and they get to work with different people. This is important at the start of the year so that all the class can get to know each other. From a teacher's perspective, it also means that stronger students might shine through, showing who are leaders and confident students. The task. Throughout the lesson, the task keeps changing. This means that student-led learning can take place to see what students already knew. Then this changed to group work, trying to fill in the gaps in other people's knowledge. After this, it then changed to using textbooks and back to student-led learning. And then after this, it changed to a competition to see which group could label the skeleton the fastest and most correctly. This change of task keeps the students highly engaged and motivated, and it enables them to build their knowledge in different ways. The performer. There are individual cheat sheets and stretch and challenge sheets that can be given out to students if they are finding the task too easy or too challenging. This means that everyone will stay on tasks and stay motivated and not become bored. For the second microcycle, it is on the short-term effects of exercise. This is a practical theory practical lesson which is based on theory, so the students can see for themselves the effects of exercise. Throughout the lesson, it involves constant heart rate and temperature monitoring, so that students can see the increase of both to gain a better understanding of the effects of exercise. To start the lesson, all students would take a resting heart rate and temperature, then go into a student-led warm-up in small groups. This is where one leader is nominated to run the warm-up, which allows time for the teacher to set up all the equipment and get ready. Then going into 3 small games, which are all slightly changed so that they're not normal rules. And in between each game, students must record their heart rate and temperature and then write it down on the worksheet, which can be seen on the next slide. Then students will go back into a student-led cool-down at the end, followed by the last heart rate and temperature recording. On this slide can be seen the worksheet that students can use throughout the lesson to help themselves find their pulse and how to use the temperature gun. Then at the bottom can be seen where to record all the different temperatures and heart rates so they can see for themselves the increase or decreases from exercise. For this lesson, I used many different constraints which can be seen on screen. Davids et al. 2003 states that constraints aim to bring out an emergent or wanted behaviour, and for this lesson, all constraints have aimed to increase the movement time for all students so they can push themselves and see the increase in heart rate and temperature. Throughout the whole lesson, the environment was constantly changing, which Rudd 2019 says is crucial so that children are mentally challenged. This means that when students are engaging in physical activity, there needs to be a skill focus so that there can be enhanced cognitive functions. During this lesson, this can be seen as the environment was constantly changing. This meant that for every mini-game, one team never played each other more than once, so they never had an advantage. This could also be seen during the warm-up, as each team had to nominate one person to be able to lead the warm-up. This was the same for the cool-down. This gives multiple people the chance to be able to use their leadership skills. As well as this, at the start of the lessons, the students could pick someone to work with so that they could help each other to measure their heart rates and temperature. The last environmental constraint is that for all the games they were all played in the lesson, they were played in a smaller playing area than normal. This changes the dynamic of the game, meaning that students have to think more when they are playing. As well as the environment changing, the task was also changing. This was done by the majority of the rules of the game being changed. This meant that in all games, the players couldn't have the ball for longer than 3 seconds, which means that the players had to keep constantly moving to be able to keep possession of the ball to win the game. In the handball game, he also couldn't dribble the ball, which meant that all students had to work harder to be able to get free from their opponent. The last task constraint is that all the balls that were used in each game were different. So for N-ball, a tennis ball is used. In handball, there was a rugby ball used. And in basketball, there was a handball used. This changes how the players will be able to attack and defend, as the game is not normal. On this slide can be seen all the references that I've used for this assignment and used to be able to create my macrocycle. Thank you for listening.